Martha began to take out on Andy her many frustrations about the state of the house, the problems with Lexi, and the pressures of her job. She also made personal attacks on Andy. He's boring, disgusting, oafish, sloppy. He can't do anything right. She criticized Andy for not being like the high-powered businessmen she was meeting in her job. During one of those verbal assaults, Martha declared in a fit of anger and irritation that she had slept with another man while on a business trip to Los Angeles. Andy was floored, but Martha dismissed the tryst as a one-time thing. It's unimportant, it's uninteresting, it's unsatisfactory, merely an experiment. Andy wondered how he could stay with Martha after that, said the intimate. He felt that she was outrageous and terrible. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and today we're going to keep going in the Martha Stewart book. My apologies that this is going to be a short episode. I'm running a little low on time today, but we'll make up for it later this week. So we're just going to jump right in. Now, we left off, Martha had become a stockbroker, and that was going pretty well for her. We also talked a little bit in the last episode about how Martha and Andy are moving away, at least Martha is, from her more conservative roots. And she's definitely, testing waters, testing boundaries. We didn't get a lot of in-depth information about what that exactly means, but definitely flirty relationships with other men, definitely getting attention from other guys, not only in her friend group, but also on Wall Street. She used her sort of flirty, coquettish, coy nature in order to draw potential clients in. So she's well aware of her female wiles. Back in high school, it seemed like she couldn't get a date. That is not her problem anymore. But that's kind of where we left off. She's on Wall Street, she's making big money, and she's real proud of it. Now, we start with a chapter that says more changes. By the end of 1969, Andy had decided to leave Webster Sheffield, where he'd been an associate for almost 6 years. His decision to move on was highly worrisome and stressful for the security-conscious Martha, who had not yet started raking in the really big bucks on Wall Street. She thought that Andy shouldn't give up his secure position at a time when they were living fairly large and their joint income was still rather small. But Andy had grown bored and disenchanted with his work, which mainly involved stuffy legal research and writing. If he had had his way, the Stewarts would have jumped out of the New York rat race for simple country living, working the land, doing carpentry, baking bread, selling antiques, living in their little place in Middlefield. But Martha's increasingly glamorous life in the Wall Street fast lane, and the potential for rich rewards, had made all of that a pipe dream. In early 1970, Andy did change jobs and negotiated a substantial salary increase in the process, much to Martha's relief. He went to work in the legal department of the Bangor Punta Corporation, a conglomerate named after an old New England railroad and a Cuban sugar company that dabbled in everything from speedboat and private airplane companies to farming equipment and motor manufacturers. Andy, who was to handle contracts, international deals, and antitrust work for the corporation, all of which he found more stimulating than what he had been doing, was often teased by his liberal anti-war friends because Smith & Wesson, the arms manufacturer, was one tentacle of the Bangor Punta octopus. With their careers on track, the Stewarts had a rigorous schedule. Andy was under the gun to learn a new area of legal work and impress his latest employers, while Martha felt very pressured because she wanted to do well. And for the first year or two, she was having a frustrating time of it, noted Sandy Green. She felt pressure to be right with the stocks that she was recommending, and it was more important for her to be right than it was for her to make commissions or to sell the last share of stock. Meanwhile, Martha had started bringing her personal problems to the office and sharing them with Green, who had become her confidant as well as mentor. She was always complaining about Andy, about the house in Middlefield, about their apartment. She'd bitched to me about those things, and some of it was just sort of venting frustration, and some of it was very legitimate, complaining that this or that or the other thing just wasn't working right. But that was part of her competitiveness. Just about every weekend, the Stewarts were making the tiring round trip to Middlefield, where they were continuing to work hard restoring their little getaway house. They were also bickering constantly, friends said. Late one Sunday night, they returned to Riverside Drive, drained from another grueling weekend, their new BMW sedan overflowing with boxes and bags of vegetables from their garden. Looking at their haul and suddenly realizing how exhausted they both felt, they burst into hysterical laughter and proceeded to toss all the food down the garbage chute. What the hell are we doing? We must be nuts. The Stewarts decided to take a much-needed vacation. Their destination was Colombia, where Kathy and Chris Tatlock had moved. Tatlock had had a good position at the prestigious Wall Street firm of Winthrop, Stimpton, Putnam, and Roberts, which he gave up. An idealist, he wanted to go abroad for his government and do his part because he had not served in the military. A Hispanophile, who had spent much time in Spain and knew the Latin culture, he was able to secure a position in Colombia negotiating contracts between the United States and the governments of Colombia and Ecuador for the Agency of the International Development, a Kennedy administration-era program offering economic and humanitarian assistance to developing countries. For her part, Kathy Tatlock left New York all starry-eyed, but once in Colombia she quickly became disillusioned. I loved the culture and the people, but hated the autocracy and the American involvement. After the Tatlocks left Manhattan, Martha and Kathy, who missed each other, corresponded regularly. As couples, the Stewarts and the Tatlocks were extremely close and often had wonderfully wild times together. But Martha never let Kathy forget a seemingly innocent incident that occurred one night during a night on the town. After dinner and drinks, the leggy Tatlock, who favored miniskirts and high heels, had gotten up on Andy's shoulders as they walked down Fifth Avenue. My skirt was hiked up around my hips, she recalled. Later, Martha would bring that up on occasion, acting as if something were going on between Andy and me. There wasn't. When Martha mentioned that she and Andy needed to get away from the daily grind and that it might be fun to see Colombia, the Tatlocks were overjoyed, and plans were immediately set in motion for the Stewarts, along with little Lexi, to make the trip. The vacation became, in Tatlock's memory, the visit from hell. To start with, Tatlock recounted, their arrival in Bogota was very hairy. They had a bad flight coming over, and they had to wait in the airport for a protracted period, and Andy became very sick when he got there, and he got even sicker very quickly. He had a horrendous systemic and local staph infection, and he developed horrible green pustules on his face, which Martha, who had a way with words and wonderful little terms, called the green meanies. Andy looked and felt horrible and ran a very high fever, and the doctor gave him what he called a horse shot of penicillin, which knocked him on his ass. But instead of feeling sorry for Andy, Martha was angry, which shocked the Tatlocks. Martha was really upset, Kathy Tatlock said, because she was afraid Andy's illness was going to ruin her vacation. One of the side trips that the Tatlocks had planned for the Stewarts' visit was the lush coffee country. With Andy bedridden, the Tatlocks were all for canceling the 5-day excursion. Andy didn't think he should go, but Martha insisted. She was angry that he had gotten sick, actually angry at him, and was punishing him. It was shocking and disturbing. Tatlock had witnessed some verbal abuse of Andy by Martha back in New York, but had dismissed it as just Martha being mad at the world. That's just Martha's modus operandi. But she had never seen anything like this. In the end, Martha won out, and the still weak Andy made the trip. The first couple of days were just horrible, Tatlock said. Andy was nauseated and feverish and weak and sleepy. We stayed in beautiful places, and Andy tried to take short outings with us, but then he'd go back to the hotel room and sleep. He spent most of the time in the hotel, and the 3 of us would go out and sightsee. That's how we did the whole coffee country trip. The other curious sidelight of the trip was Martha's decision to leave her daughter behind, in the care of the Tatlocks' 2 muchachas, who spoke only Spanish. Lexi, of course, couldn't speak a word of Spanish, so it was up to my oldest daughter, who was only about 3, to interpret for her. It raised my eyebrow that Martha was willing to leave Lexi, who didn't have the ability of communicating with Spanish-speaking caregivers. That was a little beyond my understanding of parenting. Yeah, but I just don't think Martha really cared. I think that's the thing. I mean, whoever was willing to take that child, God please, It's like, here, have her. You can. It's okay. You guys will figure it out, right? I mean, how many needs does she have? Just feed her and just make sure she doesn't walk off the balcony. Lexi's not too much trouble. This next chapter is entitled A Stepford Wife. In early 1972, the Stewarts, considered die-hard New Yorkers, startled friends with the sudden announcement that they were moving to the town of Westport in Connecticut, where they had bought an old farmhouse that required extensive and costly renovations. We were very surprised, because they always said they liked the city, and they had the place in Middlefield, said Lawrence Libben. But Martha suddenly wanted to get out of New York because they'd fallen in love with that house. However, Paul Libben had gotten a different take from Andy, who indicated the move to Westport was made as both a lifestyle choice and an investment. As we've heard before from our Ethel book, there's no income tax in Connecticut, so that's usually a move of the wealthy. And they were doing pretty well, says Paul Libben, so it was a way of sheltering some of the income and getting a good piece of property. Like the Libbens, Liz Hawes was bewildered by the Stewarts' flight to suburbia. We had all been in an apartment sort of mindset and environment, and then suddenly Martha and Andy had just gone in a whole different direction by buying that house, which wasn't anything that any of us, or certainly anything that I, envied in any particular way, she said. We all had that primal longing for houses that you sometimes get hit with when you're living in New York, but other than that, the idea of actually moving to suburbia, which is what Martha did, was nothing of interest to any of us at the time. Over the years, Martha has given various reasons for buying the house, ranging from her burning creative need to take something old and restore it to, "We thought we'd fix it up and sell it and move on." But the real reason was more prosaic. A year earlier, Andy's company had moved its headquarters to Greenwich, and he'd grown tired of the commute from Manhattan, and he wanted a home closer to his office. The 1805 federal farmhouse, which the Stewarts bought for $63,000, a relatively hefty sum in the 1970s dollars and barely affordable even with their earning power at the time, was at 48 South Turkey Hill Road in the fancy Green Farm section of Westport. In order to buy the house and get some of the renovations started, Andy had to borrow money from his employers, and Martha had to dig into her stockbroker nest egg. The new old house, which was restored mainly by the Stewarts with their bare hands, a great deal of sweat, equity, and angst, eventually became a showcase and part of the Martha Stewart myth. Called Turkey Hill Farm by Martha, the house became the headquarters for her catering and lifestyle enterprises, which she had still not conceived of when they bought the place. In the spring of 1971, when the Stewarts took up residence, bucolic Westport on Long Island Sound was considered a unique place to live, an affluent bedroom community populated by commuting Manhattan professionals and creative types, lawyers, writers, advertising executives, and artists. As one longtime resident and keen observer of the town's social scene noted, Westport is and was in the center of the Yankee land, but with a bunch of liberals and very opinionated, very active people. Around the time the Stewarts moved there was a review of a New York cabaret, Julius Monk's Upstairs at the Downstairs, which portrayed Westport as a key town. That meant at parties here, couples threw their house keys into the middle of the living room floor, and husbands and wives went home with someone else's mate. You know, wife-swapping parties. Whatever the truth, Westport was an interesting community of highly intelligent, creative, well-to-do strivers like the Stewarts, the perfect setting for a John Cleaver story. In fact, at about the time that Martha and Andy were moving in, a highly entertaining new book, The Stepford Wives, by Ira Levin, was published. It tells the story of a fictional town in Connecticut, Stepford, a place much like Westport, where the wives have been turned into chillingly beautiful robots that have been programmed to please their husbands with gourmet meals, enchanting parties, pristine homes, women who are experts in housewifery skills. It was as if Levin, who also wrote the chilling Rosemary's Baby, had somehow foreseen the Martha Stewart rage, still almost a decade away. Even more eerie and ironic was the fact that a couple of years after the Stewarts became Westporters, and around the time Martha was getting her first catering business off the ground, the town became the location for some of the exterior shots used in William Goldman's film adaptation of Levin's novel. Like other Westporters, Martha went to the location to watch the shooting. When the film was released, the critic Pauline Kael observed that The Stepford Wives was about the encroaching horror of suburban blandness, suburban women becoming over-groomed deadheads, obsessed with waxed antiseptic households. Some years later, similar criticism was heaped on Martha and her zealous followers. The move to Westport, like Martha's decision to become a stockbroker, was a milestone in the Stewarts' lives and did not happen without bringing to the surface wrenching problems, some old and unresolved, others new and formidable, that further weakened the fragile underpinnings of their already shaky 11-year marriage. One immediate concern was Lexi, whose emotional state drastically changed when the Stewarts relocated, a situation close friends felt was attributable not only to the move and the discordant state of the house, but also to the unfettered drive of her young, upwardly mobile parents. When they lived in Manhattan, Lexi was fine, because they were usually all together on the weekends at Middlefield, and Martha and Andy brought Lexi on vacations with them, a confidant observed. Even though both of them were working hard, they tried their best to spend time with Lexi after school or after dinner. Sometimes Martha juggled her hours at the office, or called in to say that she was sick so she could spend a little more time with Lexi. Andy was also a very loving and devoted father, and Lexi was really happy at Rudolph Steiner. But there was a visible change in her when they moved to Turkey Hill. They put her into first grade in the elementary school in Green Farms, and she was very unhappy there. For some odd reason, Lexi became obsessed with disliking the school's principal, and she had difficulty making friends. Norma Collier, whom Martha had designated as Lexi's guardian, also saw a change in Lexi's behavior. She became a very pouty and irritable child. Lexi was also very controlling, very meticulous, just like Martha. My daughter Kyra used to play with Lexi at Turkey Hill, and they'd color with magic markers, and Lexi would allow Kyra to take only one magic marker out of the box at a time. If she took more than one, Lexi would get very upset. Because of Lexi's problems, the Stewarts took her out of Green Farms Elementary School and enrolled her in a private school, Green Farms Academy, and her mood improved somewhat, but she remained unhappy. Something had started to go wrong, and Martha and Andy weren't sure what it was, the confidant said. But Andy later thought that it was a combination of the move, their jobs, and the great amount of energy he and Martha were putting into rebuilding the house that was causing Lexi's problems. The child definitely went inward and began to spend a lot of time in her room and barely enjoyed being with friends. And you couldn't blame her because the house was in a constant state of disarray. Rooms were being torn apart, plastic was hanging in the doorways instead of the doors because Andy and Martha were scraping the doors and chipping the paint off the doors and tearing the ceilings down. There was rat shit on the floors that had fallen down from under the plaster in the ceilings, and the floors were old and painted red. There was flimsy plywood closets in the hall, nailed to the walls. It was a mess. Like Martha, Lexi was obsessed with tidiness, so her room was the first one in the house that the Stewarts got in shape, building bookcases for her and that sort of thing. Her room became her refuge from the mess in the rest of the house, and Lexi escaped there. The Stewarts spent all their free time trying to get the house at least into livable shape. The showplace it eventually became took years to complete. Martha's drive for perfection and demand for more lavish improvements made the project take forever. Privately, Andy began comparing Martha's seemingly obsessive need for bigger, better, and more to the protagonist in the Brothers Grimm's German folk tale, The Fisherman and His Wife, a story about an impoverished woman who also has an unquenchable drive that emerges after her humble husband catches a magical fish that grants wishes. Eventually, the wife wishes to be like God. In order to make Turkey Hill grander, the Stewarts, at Martha's behest, purchased 2 neighboring lots, one costing almost $200,000. It turned the original tract into a mini-state. They installed the black-bottom swimming pool, constructed a livable barn and other outbuildings, including a chicken house, and built a huge stone wall, amongst other improvements. Martha finally had the backyard that Eddie Costera had only dreamed about back on Elm Place. It was a major restoration, and we stupidly did it while we were living in it, which I never would do again, because it was very unfair to us, Martha said later. I didn't entertain. I didn't have friends over for 2 years. We did everything ourselves except for the wiring. Martha began to take out on Andy her many frustrations about the state of the house, the problems with Lexi, and the pressures of her job. In front of friends, she declared, "Just look how beautiful their house looks. I'm disgusted with the way our house looks. It's too messy. It's too small. It's not good enough." She also made personal attacks on Andy. "He's boring, disgusting, oafish, sloppy. He can't do anything right." She criticized Andy for not being like the high-powered businessmen she was meeting in her job. On more than one occasion, she declared, "Why can't you be successful like Ralph Lauren?" And there were times when she started threateningly, "There are a lot of other men I could be with." During one of those verbal assaults, Martha declared in a fit of anger and irritation that she had slept with another man while on a business trip to Los Angeles. Andy was floored, but Martha dismissed the tryst as a one-time thing. It's unimportant, it's uninteresting, it's unsatisfactory, merely an experiment. Andy wondered how he could stay with Martha after that, said the intimate. He felt that she was outrageous and terrible, and he said, "How do I handle this woman? She's just awful, even though I love her." He was trying to struggle with the serious, unpleasant turn in the relationship. He was wondering, can this marriage last? Can we turn it around? Can I make it better? Actually, it wasn't the claimed affair that really bothered Andy as much as Martha's constant, unreasonable anger toward him, her total failure to look at herself, her inability to acknowledge error, to figure out why she was so angry, to apologize to him now and then. Martha's idea of an apology to Andy was to say something like, "It was my fault. I never should have asked someone as stupid as you to do this." Andy said he felt that Martha had 2 personalities, Martha A and Martha B. One was pleasant and fun, the other he referred to as an evil one. When he told her his theory, she just laughed, but she acknowledged she was consciously able to go from being the nice Martha to being the nasty Martha. Andy urged Martha to see a therapist with him, which she did, but nothing changed. She always thought the therapist was stupid and was on Andy's side. that was the shortest episode of all time. But tomorrow I'll make sure that we have a much longer episode to sort of make up for this one. But I do think that this is really going to set the stage for our longer episode tomorrow, because a crash is coming. The stock market is going to take a nosedive. Martha has played around and offered stock that was actually not very valuable. And she's got friends that are angry at her, and she's got clients that are really upset with her. She's secretly selling off her shares of stock while still offering that stock to her clients. And so once they find out, it's not good. So she ends up leaving that job, and then she's sort of floundering around. What is she going to do next? And that's when the catering business begins. And that's really, really rich. But of course, we interwoven into all of that have the issues with Andy, and then her issues with Lexi kind of take a back burner, because now we're going to be talking about all her issues with her employees and the way she's screwing people right, left, and center to get ahead. It's so good, you guys. So join me tomorrow for our longer episode. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. All right, see you later. Bye.